Thank you. People in Paris are so friendly. I was walking around down in the Cliché, and I met this young lady in high-top boots, a short skirt, a little tight top, and she said, "I'll do anything you want for 300 euros." I said, "Great, paint my house." Anyway, so I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the famous landmarks here in Paris. Of course, the Tour d'Eiffel and the Arc de Triomphe and the Crazy Horse Saloon. Really looking forward to that. Another very famous Parisian landmark, of course, is the Musée du Louvre, where I was speaking yesterday for Mirex, along with, what's her name? You're getting way too much exposure, Christine. And this museum is also the home of perhaps the most famous work of art ever created in the history of art. Of course, Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of Lisa Giocondo, more commonly known as the Mona Lisa. And if you've been to the Muse to see this painting, it's quite an experience. She hangs in a huge hall, probably twice as large as this, and it's dark. Apparently they control the light to protect the art. And there's always a long queue. You'll wait for some time to get in to see her. It's very popular. And it's kind of disappointing. She's small, only 77 by 53 centimeters. And time has not been kind to Mrs. Giocondo, I tell you. The paint is very dark and smoky and cracked, and she hangs behind a 4-inch box of bulletproof Lexan to protect her from theft or from vandals, because in 1954, someone threw acid in her face. In 1973, an irate woman who apparently had been denied French citizenship attacked her with a coffee mug that she had purchased in the gift shop. And so it was really quite a letdown. But in the gift shop, they sell a poster-sized reproduction. Scientists have analyzed the pigments that Da Vinci used and recreated this masterpiece just as if it would have looked sitting wet on Da Vinci's easel in 1504. It is spectacular, and it is aesthetically superior to the original in every respect. And you can buy it for $15.50, or about $40 US. So. While the original, of course, remains priceless. So that's the first point that I want to make. The most important aspect of your marketing is to be original. And we all start out doing other people's material. But I want to remind you that one of the most famous philosophers, they were teaching behavioral styles. Aristotle was teaching behavioral styles 600 years ago. Right? Fire, earth, water, air. It's the same old. And I personally believe that there is within you the ideal speaker. That if you truly want to be successful in this business, you have to bring that essence of who you are to yourself. Another famous French artist, Michelangelo, as the story goes, had a block of marble delivered to his studio, and he sat in a chair all day, staring at it, moving the chair around as the light in the room changed. And the next day the same, and the next, until finally one of his apprentices, who should have known better, approached him and said, "Master, what are you doing?" And he shouted, he says, "Bye, I'm working. Leave me alone." And so he sat in this chair, staring at this block of stone for a month, until, as he explained, he could see the finished work complete inside the stone. And then his job was merely to chip away the extra bits. And the product of that work also lives here in Paris, his masterpiece, David. And whenever I work with speakers or people come to me for advice, my approach is always the same. And I find myself repeating this story again and again and again. Take away all the barriers. Look for anything that stands between you and your audience. And barriers can be physical, like audiovisual equipment that doesn't work, or computers that take on a mind of their own, or tables or chairs on the stage, or lecterns, or bad light, bad sound. You know, if they can't hear you, right, then what's the point? They can be psychological as well. Have you had enough sleep? Are you eating? Are you taking care of yourself? They can be political or religious. And so you want to try to strip away anything that stands between you and bringing that authentic self to your audience. That's my second point. And you know, it's not easy. One of the speakers I coach, Julia Hubble, called me from New York in the middle of the night. It was 10 o'clock my time, which was midnight in New York, and she's in a complete Chernobyl meltdown. She says, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to stage at 8 o'clock in front of 1,000 people, and they've lost my luggage. Now you have to understand something about Julia. Julia's had some issues with compulsive behavior in the past, which takes the form for her of shopping for clothes mostly. She lives in a 5-bedroom house, 4 of which have been converted to walk-in closets. She has more shoes than Imelda Marcos. And she loves to dress up on stage. And she gets up here, you know, with her you know, $5,000 gown and her, you know, 6-inch spike heels. And, you know, I tried to point out her on video. I said, you know, when you wear shoes like that, it makes you walk like a giraffe, you know? You're kind of, you know, and everyone in the audience is just waiting for you to lose your balance and fall over. Don't do that. And she wouldn't take my advice. Well, here she is in New York. She says, they've lost my luggage. What am I going to do? I'm wearing a T-shirt and trainers and jeans. There's no place to shop at this. What am I going to do? I said, well, you know, first, come back in off the ledge and close the window, and we'll talk about this. You know, we've been talking a lot about being authentic on the platform. Guess what? You're going to get a chance to practice that tomorrow morning. And so we wrote 6 jokes about what happens when you lose your luggage. You know, never buy Louis Vuitton suitcase. Because apparently, you know, while I'm here in New York working, it's on vacation in Hawaii. I can't afford to do it. Anyway, so we wrote 6 one-liners like that. She came out on stage. She said, obviously, I'm not dressed appropriately for today. And she went into this little mini stand-up routine, got a couple of laughs. And it became invisible. She walked out of there with the first standing ovation of her career. And she said it was the best speech she had ever given. And what's really funny is that a couple of months later, you know what she started doing? She started selling off her collection of designer gowns. It came home to her that she had been shopping for the lifestyle that she never intended to live. And it was transformational for her as a speaker. So be authentic. Use your own stuff. People will pay more for an original. So the way that you market yourself from the stage, besides being really good on stage, being original, being authentic, is to use stories to make your material sticky. Read the Heath Brothers books, Made to Stick. If you haven't got it, and get it. Put that on your must-read list, Made to Stick. Every speaker should understand this is about how to make your stories more memorable. And I was sitting at my desk a few weeks ago, and there was a knock on the door. So I went to the door, and the UPS guy is there. He hands me this box. And so I dig in my pocket, get out my little Swiss Army knife, cut it open, and put it on the table, open up the lid. And inside this box, I dig around, the styrofoam peanuts go flying every which way, is a glass jar. One of these square ones, you know, with the 2-part brass lid, like you'd can fruit in or whatever. And inside this jar was a letter. It was rolled up. You can see it was a letter, but you couldn't see what it said. And try as I may, I could not get the lid off this damn thing. I learned later it had been super glued. And so I put it in a paper bag and smashed it. I took out the letter. If your travel agent is this hard to get through to, call us. Right? So what are you gonna do? I got to call him. I said, man, I got your letter in the bottle. That's really cool. I thought that was, we wrote the books on guerrilla marketing. He says, yeah, we know. I said, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. How did you get my name? He said, well, you're a member of the National Speakers Association. I said, well, yeah. And you're a certified speaking professional. I said, oh, yeah, that's true. And you have to do 25 paid presentations per year consistently for 5 years to qualify. I said, I'm really impressed. Nobody knows about the CSP. You've really done your homework. He says, well, yeah, then anybody that travels that much must need a good travel agent. I said, well, that's Guerrilla Marketing 101. Find people who have to have what you sell. And just tell them about yourself. That's great. Can I use this example in my story? Yeah, he said, yeah, sure. I said, well, can I ask you a couple of questions? How many did you send out? He said, 67. Well, that's kind of an odd number. What's your closing ratio so far? He says, that depends. Depends on what? Depends on what you say. So far, it's 100%. Can you say no to that? And so now I have a new travel agent. So, this is a test. How many characters were in that story? Were you paying attention? Tell me who they are. There were 3. Who are they? Who are the characters? It was me, yeah, the guy doing the travel agent, right? The UPS guy, right? Now, there's one more. One more. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a half a dozen of us. I didn't do them all by myself. That's why we're the Guerrilla Group instead of Orvel Ray and Associates, which means usually a guy working alone in his bedroom. I see some of you can relate to that. Yeah. And there's one more character. And I learned this lesson from another very famous long-term speaker, one of my great coaches and mentors, Lou Heckler, the narrator. You make your stories more memorable when you separate yourself from the action of the story. Because there's Orvel up here who's at his desk and opening the box and doing all of that. But there's also the Orvel that's standing here with you today telling the story. And your stories become much more vivid and more memorable and more sticky if you do this demarcation. And Lou taught me how to do this. First of all, by using voices. And he said that most people have trouble doing accents because they overdo it. They try too hard. He said, for example, if you're trying to do a southern accent, all you need is a hint in the United States. Or if you're trying to do an Australian, you slow way down and you say mate a lot. And, or if you're trying to do German, I was flying on Lufthansa and they said, "We will now show the movie and you will enjoy it." See, it doesn't take, it just takes a little bit of differentiation vocally to make that bookmark between the various characters. Now, another great lesson that I learned from, she learned it from Marcel Marceau, another great French genius, while we're talking about French geniuses. Victoria Leblanc, longtime member of NSA, teaches mime and storytelling. And she taught me some just basic acting things. And mime, for most of us, just means, acting as if the physical world that we're standing is real. And, if you're doing the pane of glass thing, you can't do this because what did I just do? She said, don't break the glass. If you break the glass, then the illusion shatters at the same time. And so that's why you can't stand here and tell a story about, the guy's sitting behind his desk one day and he calls on the phone. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. He hangs up the phone. How are we going to do that? And then you take 2 steps downstage. You can't do that. Why? Where am I standing?
Within the desk.
In the middle of the desk. Yes, so that's why this story opened with the desk over here, stage right. The UPS guy and what's here? Right, you see, the door is still there 5 minutes later. It didn't go away. And so over the course of your act, you can build a whole set of imaginary props and objects that become real and memorable for your audience. Tremendous lesson. Changed the way that I tell stories. Now, you use these stories to sell from the platform by incorporating examples of what it would be like for a client to work with you. You heard me do that earlier. What was that story about? What's that? My friend Julia Hubble and her experience in New York, right? And so she wound up with a standing ovation instead of winding up a splat on the street. Now that's not selling, but people will remember those stories. And if you can, through the power of story, demonstrate the value that you create for your clients, that is going to get you referred, it's going to get you invited. And I had an example of this recently. I got a call from a company in Houston, Texas, Purvis Industries. They provide parts for machinery, primarily like bearings and lubricants and related items, through a network of 47 service centers in 7 states across the South, mostly. And they had a competitor that was going out of business that was basically giving away their inventory. And their margin was just going to hell. They were on the verge of going out of business, actually. Small family-owned business. And so I flew down to Houston. I spent 3 days, interviewed the CEO, interviewed the national sales manager. I spent 2 days riding with 2 of the regional sales managers. We interviewed customers. We interviewed salespeople. I sat in one of the service centers for half a day listening to the sales guys on the phone. And one of the conversations, I overheard this guy saying, well, yeah, that's $27. And the customer on the other end is obviously complaining about the price. He says, well, yeah, that does sound a lot. Yeah, it's a German bearing, actually. SK, it's very high quality. And I think it's the same one you bought last time. And he does a couple of things here. And he says, yeah, this is the same part number. And last time you bought it, you only paid $18. So I'll give it to you for that price. Well, I thought that was kind of odd. So I asked him, I said, well, how did you do that? He says, well, it's like Control-Alt-Shift-L. I can't do it. It gives you the last price that the customer paid. I said, well, how long ago was this? He looks it up again. He says, it was 3 years ago. Wait a minute. Why would you give the same customer the same price 3 years ago? Just the difference in the currency between the dollar and it would have right, made up. You just gave away any margin on that. He says, oh, I didn't think of it. So I asked the CEO about that. He says, Orvel, you just earned your fee, and we hadn't done the training yet. Nobody other than the sales team even knew that feature was built into the software. And so one of the first things we talked about in the training was, don't do that. And they all went, oh, yeah, duh. Okay. We did a half-day training for about 200 salespeople. We videotaped it, sent the DVD to the rest of the employees in the company. A month later, Bob Purvis called me to say, and don't you love when you get calls like this? He said, our gross margin has increased by 3%. I'm sorry, I got to do it the French way there. 3%. And not gross sales, gross profit, right? The difference between margin. And we've had our first $10 million month since 2007 when the bottom fell out of the market. So do the math. $10 million times 12 months times 3% is how much? A lot, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I tell you, the school system in the United States has really gone to hell in recent years, I have to say. Yeah, $3.6 million net to their bottom line over a year. So you can see why Bob was so delighted with that outcome. And see, when you can build that kind of measurable value with your clients, and it takes real work, it takes really keen diagnostics. I mean, not only do you have to provide solutions, but you have to provide the right solution to the right problem at exactly the right time to make that kind of a difference. And you have to have metrics in place, a system to follow up and follow through, and have those conversations so that you can collect those stories and have the chance to tell them from the stage. But when you can deliver $3.6 million from a 3-hour sales training, you will never have any trouble justifying your fees. So, measure the results. Track these people down. Don't just take the check in the plane and go home. Collect those stories and incorporate them back into your show. Give your audience the experience of what it's like to work for you. Because there's someone in the room who's in the same situation, the same pain. They're going to go, oh, we need this. We need to teach our people how to do referrals. We used to do that. Stop doing that. We need that. And while I'm on the subject, there's another really important lesson that I learned from another very famous speaker, Patricia Fripp, CSP, CPAE, past president of the National Speakers Association. She and I have been dear friends since she first came to our chapter, the first meeting that we had the first time in Colorado. She was our keynoter there. And in my coaching with her, she taught me about the I-U balance. She says that literally, you take a transcript of your speech. You've heard this advice today. And you go through the transcript, and every time you see a first-person pronoun, every time you see an I or a me or a my, make sure that you balance it with a you or a your. And, you know, it makes me crazy when I hear speakers, you know, from the platform saying, oh, I do this and I do that, and in my opinion, I think this, and I think in the way I do this, and here's my form for that, and here's my product for this, and you should buy my book because, boy, I'm so great. You don't have anything to prove when you step up here. Naomi Rhodey taught us another great lesson. The privilege of the platform means that you are already an expert by virtue of having been handed the microphone. Don't stand here and try to prove it to yourself. Get your audience involved. You know, the other day I was at the grocery store, and I'm sure you've done this. You ever go to the grocery store and you're standing there in line and you look at the crap in other people's baskets? You know, people buy the weirdest stuff. You've done this, haven't you? Right? So the checker is ringing up this woman standing in line ahead of me, and she has a mop. Apparently she's cleaning house. She's got a broom. She's got some laundry detergent and some chlorine bleach and some spray cleaner and some sponges and some steel wool. And she rings it up, and the clerk says, that'll be $28.60. And she says, God, I can't believe the price of food these days. Now, were you counting? How many eyes were there in that story? There was one at the very beginning. How many yous were there? 4, maybe 5. I wasn't paying that close attention. But do you see the difference? When you take even a personal first-person story and you reframe it and put it into the terms of your audience's experience, you get them on the train, you're taking them for the ride along with you. And then you add voices and character and mime, as you just saw, all incorporated together. And it creates this magical experience that people will remember forever. So, that's what I would call guerrilla marketing from the platform. And one of the best examples that I've ever seen, I was speaking at the Pan Pacific Hotel International Sales Meeting in Yokohama, Japan. This is, I got to do the math, 2001, so 11 years ago. And big sales meeting, 300 salespeople from all over the Pacific Rim, and a big party. You know, I love working in the hospitality industry. It's one of my specialties because they throw the best parties, right? You get a bunch of meeting planners together in a hotel, they will knock themselves out to show all the other hotel managers how. We had the reception in the basement, in the mechanical room where the furnaces and everything, and we're all dressed in Japanese formal attire. And there wasn't a speck of ducts and machinery going and furnaces burning and hose pumping, and you could eat off the floor in that room. It was extraordinary. And after the training, and then there was this big party and dinner, and after the dinner, and after the taiko drummers and the geisha show, and after way too many little cedar boxes of sake, we're at this like after party for the team, and this very tall gentleman, blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy with a Northern European accent, he leans against the wall. It pins me. You've had people do this to you at meetings, right? Pins me to the wall, and he gets right in my face. This is Orvel Ray. We you must come to Dhaka. So this country is the poorest nation in the world. We have the highest density population per kilometer in the planet. People live on $128 a year. The government is corrupt. The business is horrible. You must come to Dhaka. They need to hear your message. Okay, so I'm kind of. So I looked at his badge. Hans Winsness, General Manager, Pan Pacific, Shonagon, Dhaka. And I'm thinking, where the fuck is Dhaka? I have no idea where, Bangla, what? Anyway. And so I said something like, Hans, listen, that sounds, like a great idea. Have your people talk to my people. We'll do lunch, whatever. And I kind of excused myself from the party. And I didn't give it another thought. Denise and I, we got on a plane, we flew back to Colorado, and I never heard from him. But a couple of months went by, and I started getting these emails. Everything is all arranged. Here are the dates. We will host you at the hotel. First-class airfare on British Airways, all sponsored for you and Denise both. You'll come to Dhaka. We'll do the seminar. We'll call it Business Without Borders. It'll be fantastic. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, what the hell is that? So I said, Denise, did you set this thing up? What is this? I don't have any paperwork on this. And she looks at it. She says, I don't know. Pan Pacific, though. This doesn't have anything to do with the Yokohama job, does it? Well, maybe. I don't know. And so I explained to her about about this guy I had met. And I told her, I said, but I didn't commit to this. I mean, to fly halfway, 12 time zones, halfway around the world, to speak for a week for free. I would never agree to that. She says, well, how drunk were you? Honestly, I don't remember. She says, well, then you're going to have to go do it. Don't you hate when your wife is right? So that's my next point. Woody Allen said 80% of sex is showing up. Right? I mean, show up. Show up at the meeting. And while you're at it, don't complain about the food in first class on the airplane. Nobody cares. Most of the people in your audience never get to fly anywhere, let alone first class. Don't, as they say in Australia, stop whinging. It makes you sound like an arrogant jerk. So show up, be dressed, be sober, be prepared, and then give it all you got. So we fly to Dhaka via Calcutta. That's a whole other story. And we're greeted at the airport by a fleet of black SUVs with a motorcycle escort. We drive through this torrential tropical rainstorm through the city. And here's the hotel, the Pan Pacific Shonagon. We come around the corner to the front, which is armed guards out here. Yes, those are AK-47 machine guns. This was not very encouraging. And they literally rolled out a red carpet. We walked in with flash bulbs going off. It was like the Academy freaking Awards. It was really quite an experience. They put us in the presidential suite on the top of the hotel where we had a nice view of the city and another pair of armed guards with machine guns on the roof, which had been placed there for our security, apparently. This did not help me sleep at night. And Dhaka is really, it really is the armpit of the universe. This is the part of the world. It doesn't get any poorer than this, even in sub-Saharan Africa. The piles of garbage in the city, these little two-stroke tuk-tuks. The air is unbreathable. This was a clear, sunny day, relatively speaking. It was horrible. And I just said I shouldn't whinge about it, but it really was. We were both, like Denise and I, and we traveled a lot. We were just stunned. We were in shock. And so Hans, he says, the best way to see the city, just like with Paris, is to go on a boat. And the Dhaka is surrounded on four sides. It's right at the confluence of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra rivers. And so he said, it's too dangerous to go by car, so we will arrange for you to go on this tourist boat around the city. And so we boarded this little traditional Thai boat, and went around. And this stuff here, the green stuff, is water hyacinth. It grows wildly in the water because there's so much crap in the water. I mean, really, the water is like chocolate, and it's not silt. It's sewage, mostly, quite frankly. And people live on these little tiny islands called chars that build up because of the sediment as the rivers, the spring rains, the floods come down from the Himalayas. They build up these islands. Sometimes they last for weeks, sometimes years. And people live in these little shanties. And of course, Denise is sitting in the front of the boat doing her, National Geographic thing as we're going around the city. And, kids are waving at us and people are going by in boats. And we were just, it was just hard to believe that anyone could live like that. It just broke our heart. And we saw some kids who had collected plastic bags and washed them in the river and then laid them out on the levees to dry so that they could resell them at the markets where people buy their food. So we got quite an education. One of the owners of the boat, this is Yves Maras, another great French hero whose name you would know if you know anything about sailing. He holds, to this day, the world record for the fastest circumnavigation of the earth in a single-handed solo sailboat. And he was explaining that in 1998, he had the opportunity to purchase a French canal barge, like this one. We saw some of these on the river last night, you remember. It's 10 meters wide, 40 meters long. It drafts about 1 meter of water. It was being decommissioned, so he bought it for 1 franc. And in a heroic feat of seamanship, he sailed it up the Seine, across the Mediterranean, through the Suez, down the length of the Red Sea, across the Indian Ocean, up the Ganges to Dhaka. And his wife, Runa, explained that their vision, their idea was, if they could convert this barge, then they could make it into a hospital ship and they could get into these inaccessible islands and provide services to these people. There's millions of people that live on these isolated, they're cut off from 8 months, 9 months of the year. And they had run out of money. They got the superstructure welded together, and now the boat was sitting rusting in dry dock. They were about to scrap it for the money that was owed, and they pleaded with us. They said, "Oh, please, can you help us? Can you make a donation? You are Guerrilla Marketing. Can you help? Can you help? What can you do?" It broke my heart. I've had some success in this business, but I'm not a rich man. I'm certainly not in a position to write a check like that. And we went back to the hotel just feeling awful. Well, as things turned out, Hans was really, he was quite the operator. He put this whole seminar together, and we were overrun. We expected about 150 people. We had 350 people show up, standing room only. They asked if we would do a second session. I said, okay, I fly all the way here to speak for free. Now you want me to do another day for free on top of that? Yeah, can you do that? Okay, well, I'm not going to go sightseeing again. That was a big letdown. Fine. And so we filled the room again a second day. And you can see here, we had a TV crew there. This is the mayor of Dhaka. He came to the seminar. There's Hans, my friend. There's me 10 years ago in shock. I was completely overwhelmed. I'm sitting there thinking, how the hell did I get myself into this situation? And I'm counting up all the money I'm losing back because I'm not back home working. And anyway, so we finally got done with all of that. And the next day at breakfast, Hans takes me aside. We sit down. He says, Orvel Ray, we have a problem. I said, well, what's the problem, Hans? He says, we have made a profit. Well, Hans, I don't know about you, but where I come from, that's not usually a problem. And he says, well, in order to get the permit to do the seminar, we had to pay some bakshish, and we had to promise that we would give any profits to charity, but we never expected that it would be. So anyway, so if you will just tell me what your fee would be, then we'll write you a check. It'll all be okay. So, well, how much are we talking about? He says, $10,000. Which would have been about what my fee would have been under normal circumstances. But after the way we had been treated and the people that we had met and the things that we had seen, I didn't have the heart. I'm sorry, I can't accept that. But I can suggest perhaps a very worthwhile charity. And I told him about Hans and Ruma and their vision and this boat. And Hans, he gets very excited. He says, oh, this is perfect, this is perfect. What are you doing for lunch today? We're having the American Chamber of Commerce today for lunch in the hotel, and you will be the speaker, and I will take care of everything. Here we go again. Well, as the Brits say, in for a penny, in for the pound, right? And so we did. We went to this luncheon, and the camera crew was there, and he had tracked Hans and Runa down somehow through the tour boat thing, and so they were there, and he had arranged in the morning to have this great big check made, right? And when you convert 10,000 US dollars into the local currency, it becomes 500,000 takas. Right, so I'm standing there holding this magnificent check, having second thoughts about about that now, because I could have done a lot with, right? I mean, you don't want to give away 500,000 anything, even if it's takas. And so they told the story about the boat, and then Runa starts crying, and then I start crying, and I'm standing there giving them the check and crying, and there isn't a dry eye in the place. And then a miracle happened. This guy in the back row, this fat cat, holds his cigarette up in the air, and he says, I work for Masery Columbia Chemicals. We'll donate enough titanium white paint to paint your goddamn boat stem to stern. Well, not to be outdone, another guy stands up. He says, well, I work for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. We've got a container full of antibiotics that are getting close to their sell-by date. You can have the whole thing. Someone else had an X-ray machine. Someone else had film for the X-ray machine. And so it went. They kept trying to outdo each other. Well, the cameras are still rolling. It was on the 6 o'clock news. And by the time Denise and I left for the airport the next morning, they had raised more than $250,000 in cash and in-kind donations for this project. And 11 months later, the Friendship hospital boat. Oh, please don't fail on me at this point. Yeah. There it is. It set sail for the Chars of northern Bangladesh. Now, I want to remind you, I would love to take credit for this. I would love to be the hero of this story. But you can't. See, you can't be the hero of your own stories. Or it just, again, it makes you sound like an arrogant jerk. We've all accomplished great things, whether it's, climbing Everest, or in my case, climbing the stairs at the end of the day. Sometimes I'm so tired. But this boat, the first year it went to 11 ports of call, served 148,000 patients. These women walk across these deserted, these are just piles of sand, these islands. They walk for kilometers and kilometers when this boat pulls up. They stand in line sometimes for days by the thousands for treatment. And they're given basic health services, basic health education. They've drilled hundreds of tube wells, dug thousands of pit toilets. They've established a network of 500 remote clinics across Bangladesh, doing operations for ganglions, reconstructive surgery, doing basic childbirth and child health education, mostly for women, providing vaccinations for hundreds of thousands of children, and it's all free. They do this in a partnership with UNICEF and Physicians Sans Frontières. And it has become a phenomenon. They added to the fleet a high-speed water ambulance, and then another boat that was sponsored for them by Emirates Airlines, also built on an obsolete barge. And this year they've added another ship. This was refitted. It was donated to them by Greenpeace so that they can have a seagoing vessel to serve coastal populations that are cut off by typhoons and hurricanes, called the Ren Guru. All because of that drunken conversation after the party in Yokohama. You see, you never know how much difference you make in the world. More often than not, you'll never see it. And if I hadn't kept in touch, if I hadn't built my network, if I hadn't followed through, I never would have heard the rest of this magnificent story. That one conversation has saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and changed the lives of millions of others. And that was just one gig. That's why I love this job. That's why I love this career. And that's why I love NSA. And it's my great honor and pleasure to stand here and share these stories with you today. Thank you. Go get them. Thank you.